Looking at the Old Testament, and we are picking up where we left off last week. We are in the book of Exodus. In the book of Exodus, uh, and our this is would be our second class from the book of Exodus. And last week we looked at Moses being called, and again we're kind of walking through these very quickly, obviously in the interest of time. But Moses was has been called. About how old is Moses at this point in time?
About 80.
80.
He's
Yeah.
40 and 40, so.
Right. So it's a very easy thing to remember, but it's useful. It's a useful tool when trying to follow Moses' progression. We see him, we pick up with him being born. We see him at about 40 when he slays the Egyptian that's struggling with the Israelite, and then leaves and departs. And then we see him at age 80 when he's being called now to deliver to deliver Israel out of Egypt. And so it's very important to understand that because he's been living for 40 years. I mean, we say the ages, but think about what it means. He's been living, he's got this whole life, he's got this whole family, right? For 40 years now, he's been existing. We see this big fast jump in time and don't contemplate that idea. There are some who aren't even 40 years old yet. So, and when I consider 40 years of my life, that puts me back in my teenage years. So there's a lot of span there, a lot of living that has gone on in that span of time. And God doesn't give us all the details about it. So sometimes when people are trying to read a lot into the Bible, into the things that God doesn't tell us, we need to understand that's a very, very dangerous thing to try to do. He's telling us certain things. He's telling us certain points, and he's focused upon certain things. This isn't every detail of Moses' life here. This is the story of Jesus and the promised Savior. And Moses is one of the elements of that story. I mention that because the Jews put a lot of significance into Moses, right? But it's hard to think about him in the light of all of this. If you were living as a Jewish person, it's hard to think about him as actually having relatively low significance. Does anyone dispute that statement?
Well, they do call it the Mosaic Law, so
Indeed.
he is significant to them, I would say, just behind Abraham.
And he's significant to them, he's significant to us. But relatively speaking, this is not his story.
No, it's all the story of Jesus, so we know that.
Yes. And so that's what I'm saying. It's now hard to shrink that significance and shift your focus to Jesus, which is one of the challenges for someone who is living the life as a Jew and believes that the Christ has not come yet, to give that aspect up. It's been thousands of years of the central focus being Moses. Yes.
And when we study Genesis, and when we study Abraham, and we study Moses, and for the rest of the Old Testament, you get something out of it, or you get more out of it, when you constantly remind yourself this is the story of Jesus.
Yes.
Because when you have that mindset, all of a sudden you see so many more things that say, oh, Jesus is everywhere in the Old Testament. And a lot of times we go back and look at pieces, but as a whole, it's his story.
Yeah. So again, I agree, it's a healthy practice to just remind ourselves of that. I just parked right there just to mention that so that we don't run past some of those details. We're not able to delve too deeply into any particular thing here, but I also don't want us to miss the greater significance of some of those things. God gives Moses signs and appoints Aaron to assist him. Now we know that Moses is initially afraid and reluctant to carry out God's plan here. He's very reluctant to carry out God's plan. He doesn't see himself as being capable of doing so. Now, in and of himself, he's not wrong. He's not capable of doing so. Again, the lesson for him, the lesson for us, it's not about you. Your significance is not that high. As crucial as you are to the story, the law is called the Mosaic Law, as you pointed out. As crucial as you are to the story, it's not about you. You didn't do any of this. God delivered Israel. And if it weren't you, it would be somebody else. It's by the power of God. Moses and Aaron first confront Pharaoh. And what is Pharaoh's response? Resistance. Not only resistance, hostility. Yes.
He sees himself as a god. And so the pharaohs have been worried about the Israelite people as a danger, and they've taken these steps to move them farther away and make life hard on them. So when they come and all of a sudden they say, let us go, well, we're using you as a workforce. We don't want to let you go. And you're saying your God's more powerful than me? Yeah, hostility pretty much says it.
But the thing is, God wants us to be good people. And what we're seeing is somebody whose response is anything but good. Not only is he saying no, which we would have expected, he makes their life harder. Now keep in mind how hard their life has been all during the life of Moses. From the time of his birth, they're making the life of Israel hard. And now they're going to make it harder. Harder than what? I mean, it seems like their life is pretty difficult. But the Bible says, look, I can make it harder. And that's what he does. That's not the sign of a good person. When we look at this bigger story that goes on, we need to understand that, because when the Bible talks about hardening Pharaoh's heart and the things that Pharaoh does, sometimes, and some people still read it as, well, because it's prophecy, Pharaoh had no choice. This is the person Pharaoh was. That's what we need to understand. So God is bringing about his will through his providence. He's bringing about his will. And he's going to judge Israel. And when we read this story, we say rightfully so. We can understand his justice being done in here. And even in judging them, he's still carrying out his will, and we'll see that a little later. Brother Tharp.
Yeah, I think a lot of times you're right. We say God hardened his heart, but he hardened his heart by the things he did, knowing how he would react. Did that take his agency away? No, it didn't. But God knew, we know people, if we push their buttons, they're going to react a certain way, and that's all God did.
Yeah, but and when we look at the bigger picture of what God did, what did he do? He manipulated things where there's a famine. They go into Egypt. They grow in Egypt. And now we've got concern over what they're going to do. All of this is playing into his heart. So by bringing about God's plan, Pharaoh's heart is growing colder and colder. Now, if we want to call that God hardening his heart, we can understand it, but what we shouldn't do is look at it as God forced Pharaoh into doing something. Judgment would not be fair if he had no choice. He had agency in this whole thing. And yet, by prophecy, again, God knew the choices he would ultimately make. God renews his covenant promises and identifies himself as the Lord in Exodus 6. Exodus 6, verse 1. Yes. The Lord said unto Moses, Now shalt thou see what I will do to Pharaoh, for with a strong hand shall he let them go, and with a strong hand shall he drive them out of his land. And God spake unto Moses, and said unto him, I am the Lord, and I appeared unto Abraham, unto Isaac, and unto Jacob by the name of God Almighty, but my name Jehovah was not known to them. And I have also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the land of their pilgrimage, wherein they are strangers. And I have also heard the groaning of the children of Israel, whom the Egyptians keep in bondage, and I have remembered my covenant. Wherefore say unto the children of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will rid you out of their bondage, and I will redeem you with a stretched out arm and with great judgment. He tells them a reminder of who he is. And that's how this is presented. It's a reminder, because this is a story that we talked about would have been renewed over time. But now imagine 20 generations have passed. They've been on a journey for 20 generations. How would that story hit later on? How does the story of Jesus hit now? Everybody, Jesus could come anytime. How do we receive that?
Very different opinions. It gets a little frazzled over time, but the core is there, and they know it, but they try and
You're right.
tweak it.
You're right. If we, again, extrapolate how we see our society and the story of Jesus and how it affects people, it should give us that conclusion that, yes, they know the elements, the basics of the story, but maybe it doesn't hit as hard now. You know, their parents have been in bondage, their parents' parents, their parents' parents' parents. You know, one day we're going to be free. One day we're going to be God's people. One day God is going to deliver us. Again, people are the same. How do we respond to Jesus coming again? Yeah, I believe it, but I don't act like I believe it. I don't act with urgency. Yes, Brother Tharp.
Well, look how fragmented Christianity is in America. How many different ways it's believed and how far people have strayed from the written word. We have a copy of the written word. They have 400 years and word of mouth. I can only imagine it was a worse situation then than it is even now.
I would imagine. Yes.
So in the grand scheme of things, the promise goes from one nation being blessed to all the nations will be blessed or to be blessed. So how do you transition from that system to a system today where all the nations are to be blessed? So how do God use other nations? We know that the Jews were the chosen race. So Pharaoh is doing his best to please his own people. All the Egyptians will be happy with what the Pharaoh decided to deal with the Israelites. You know, you keep them so we don't have to work so hard. You know, you keep them so that we be served. You know, make them work harder so our fortune will grow much more. So you're looking at one particular race being suppressed, but how did God use the other nations, other races, in the grand scheme of things?
Well, we see this play out in the story, how the other nations are, but let's remember that the promise always was all nations would be blessed. That was always the promise. That was the end goal. Now, we see Israel as the vehicle by which this is brought in, and we are grafted on to Israel. In other words, God showed how having a chosen people follow him is in our best interest. And we are grafted on as that chosen people. And that is the fulfillment of the initial promise. The initial promise, all nations would be blessed. Now, as far as the rest of the nations are concerned, we only get the glimpses that God gives us. Now, we see him utilizing other nations. We see him utilize Egypt. Like we said before, they are stronger. They grew stronger. They were going to have to endure some things. They grew stronger for the things they suffered. This is a reality. It doesn't make what Egypt did right, but God is serving a different purpose. Now, Egypt thinks, look, we're going to increase our wealth. Where did that wealth end up going? To Israel. Israel grew as a people. They came in not with all of that gold and silver, but they left with it as reparation for their service. They didn't steal it. God doesn't describe it. We're jumping ahead in the story, but that's, so we see other nations being utilized. What we don't see is the entire world. As I mentioned, as we transitioned into this, we transitioned from a focus before the flood, talking a great deal about the whole world. And then, all of a sudden, we start following a focus thread. We don't see everything. That's the reality. But we know it's happening, and then we see God utilizing these other nations. We'll see him utilizing them in the cycle of Judges. He's utilizing these other nations to bring about his will. God had a plan, but all of the details of those plans I won't pretend to know. I can't pretend to know the things that God didn't reveal to us. But we do see exactly how he dealt with Israel. Yes?
Yeah, you covered a little bit. I was going to say, we just get glimpses of the ones that interact with Israel. We see the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Philistines, all the ones around them, Egypt, and eventually Rome, Persia. But we don't hear about a lot of nations, China and Britain and most of Africa and the Americas. So his question is really kind of unanswerable in that we don't hardly get it in the Bible, a picture of what's going on.
Yeah, like I said, we can't answer the details of every nation, but we get a glimpse, and knowing the consistency of God, that helps us to understand. God has always dealt with man and been fair to man. We can say that. How exactly he dealt with all of those nations during this period of time, we're talking about thousands of years. And God doesn't let us know. It is impossible for us to conclusively say. Yes?
But with this recorded history in the Bible, we can draw lessons from it. We know that Egypt was saved from the brink of starvation because of one immigrant that came from outside Egypt. And through this one immigrant, God preserved Egypt and make it prosperous. So, but because of ungratefulness, because of our forgetfulness, we did something wrong. And then we take this blessing of this immigrant and then turn against them and suppress them. And as a result, like you say, they end up giving up all their fortunes.
Indeed. Well, again, absolutely, we should learn the proper lessons. Unfortunately, many people have learned the wrong lessons from the Bible. They've focused on the oppression and concluded it's okay to oppress and things of that nature. We should learn God's principles. We should learn his story, all of it, so that prayerfully we're not found on the wrong side of things, fighting against God in his name. Absolutely. Let's continue on. So, but I did want to stop there and talk about God renewing the covenant, that promise, and with them, because it's a cycle we kept seeing. We saw not only with Abraham, where he gave him the promise, he renewed it, and we saw it with Isaac, we saw it with Jacob. So we know, we talked about how we know it's continued to be passed down. And here, now they're about to be delivered, he's reminding them. Now, most of us in here already know this story. You got to be thinking what I'm thinking. How is it that Israel were so ungrateful, so dense in understanding when God actually delivers them? But, spoiler, that's exactly what happens. So understand, if they didn't know, they know now. Yes.
And it's interesting, we've noticed several times that they've got these large periods of time when they only have word of mouth. Now with Moses on the scene, they're going to start writing things down. Does that help the situation? Do they become rock hard faithful for the rest of their existence? No, they still stray. Every other king is good, bad, good, bad. So just writing it down isn't enough either.
Yes. Now, the thing is, we could learn the wrong lesson from that and say it's futile. Having it written down is futile. No, that wasn't the problem. Having God as their king was futile. That wasn't the problem. So again, like Brother Young said, we should learn some lessons from this. Just sometimes we take the wrong lessons away. Oh, you guys are too legalistic. Look, that's not the problem. Sticking to his word, that's not the problem. You're taking the wrong lesson away. So absolutely, we've got to dig into these principles and understand what lesson God is teaching us. He gives the genealogy of Reuben, Simeon, and Levi. Moses and Aaron commissioned again to go before Pharaoh. And finally, we get to the plagues themselves. We're not going to delve into all the details of the plagues because that's a whole quarter in and of itself. But we know that those plagues were intended, and there's a lot of messages in the plagues. It might be interesting to do a class where we just delve into some of the details, the things that we don't often look at. But God said he's going to drive them, he's going to force Pharaoh's hand with a mighty hand. And he gives these plagues, and the Aaron's rod becomes a serpent. We know that doesn't convince them. They think of their own magicians in being able to do that. That the first plague, water turned into blood. Second plague, the frogs. The third plague, lice. Fourth plague, flies. The fifth plague, death of livestock. The sixth plague, boils. The seventh plague, hail. You know, I don't know. The first plague seems like it would be enough. It goes on, 8th plague, locusts. 9th plague, darkness over all the land. And the 10th plague, the death of the firstborn. Now you can see the 10th plague has very lasting implications for Egypt. So here's my question. Why not start with the 10th plague? Yes.
Well, I've heard part of the theory is that each plague can, in some way, correspond to the different gods that they worshipped. And so he's slowly just knocking their gods down. And also you're building up to the 10th, which we know has great significance for us. It's another precursor talking about Jesus. And becomes what we do every Sunday morning. We remember the Christ. They remembered this plague every year, and they still do, you know. So you're asking me to explain God's plan.
Yes. Yes. But everything you said, you know, again, very good examples. Anything else? Anyone? You know, with the first 9 plagues, there's 3 cycles of 3, and again, if we get into it, it's very interesting. Then we get the 10th plague, whereby, look, anybody is going to say, okay, you guys got to get out of here. The firstborn of every household is dead. You guys have got to get out of here. All of the other things, it seems recoverable, but that is, for lack of a better term, a death blow. That is just it, Brother Tharp.
I would say it shows God's long suffering and the repeated chance for them to come to their senses, even though he knows they won't, but it shows his nature, I think.
All true. And ultimately he knows, and he knows at what point they're going to be delivered, because he even says, after this, he's going to let you go. He's going to want you to go very quickly. So the portion that we often skip over in focusing on the effect of Egypt is the effect on Israel. Every one of these is preparing Israel as well. What is it saying to them? Go back to the gods. Their gods that you've been observing, they're no gods. This isn't all about Egypt. It's about Israel. Israel is going to have to leave where they've been for 400 years. They're going to have to live in a different sort of way. And all during that time, they've been observing. They know how Egypt, what Egypt valued. And God is showing them definitively, I am the Lord. Don't look at this. Don't look at this. Don't be concerned about the sun. Don't be concerned about any sort of land, fertility, anything else. I have the power of life and death. I am the Lord. That's what he's teaching to Israel, one step after another. Brother Tharp and then Brother Young.
It also kind of explains, after Moses goes up on to get the 10 Commandments, and they turn right back to a false god, the calf. And God has no patience for that. I just showed you God after God that I rule over, and it explains why he dealt with them so harshly.
Indeed. Again, we don't want to miss the big picture. We don't want to just jump to, they made a calf. God showed them everything they need to know. The fact that they did that was hearkening back to Egypt. I just told you, I just showed you definitively that those gods have no power. They had no excuse. No excuse. Brother Young.
You know, with the 10th plague, a thought just came to mind, especially when China adopted a one-child policy. I'm surprised after the 10th plague, there are still Egyptians standing, especially Pharaoh himself. Normally, the first son inherit, right, the throne. I'm surprised that he was still alive.
Yeah, unless it was handed down. I'm not sure of passage there, but that would be interesting
Yeah, like,
to look at.
if China
If we
can-
can fill it in. I know he's also the one that's missing, so in a lot of the secular history.
We always think that one child, the firstborn is killed, it's just one person killed. But no, it could be the whole family, because the father could be the first child, the mother could be the first child, and they have only one child. So the whole family could have wiped out
Yeah.
because of the last blood.
I mean, we know it was devastation. And again, it was enough for them to say, okay, for him to say, you gotta get out of here now. But again, that teaching aspect is something we need to understand. Why has God not come again? Why does God allow people to go through the things that they go through here in life? All of these questions are things people use to say God doesn't exist. They're missing the point, though. We need to understand the story ourselves for our own faith so that we don't lose faith. Don't think you're above losing faith. Don't think you're above doing exactly what Israel did back then. They've got the same heart that you have. You know, I know when they were being led out, they were happy and they were strong and they were completely determined in their resolve, as we are. And we'll be building a golden calf in no time. Let the wrong thing happen. So we have to reaffirm our faith. But we also need to understand how to give an answer to other people. God has been consistent. He's not changing. That's what he has said about himself. He doesn't change. And just like he worked with Israel, he's working with us. Even today, he's working with us. So we have difficulties put before us, and we have to strengthen our resolve. We have to remember what God has said. We have to remember to stay on the right path. All of these things are absolutely essential lessons for us to take from this story. This isn't just an ancient story. It's not just an Easter movie to watch. This is actual history from which we should learn. The Passover is instituted. A very key element through all of this goes back to, I believe, Brother Tharp, you mentioned this. This would now be a key point where Israel is going to remember. They're going to, year by year, keep the Passover. And it's going to be a reminder that God brought them out of Egypt. Did it work? Very quickly, though, they slid right back, right? Year after year, they're to be reminded. And year after year, they seem to forget how powerful God is and what he did for them. Brother Tharp?
I would say, if you look at the Old Testament and the many holidays, festivals, memorials that they celebrate, they do it once a year. And did it work? No. We remember Jesus' sacrifice once a week. Well, we do. Some only do it once a year or once a month. Did it work? No. Look at the fractured society still. So the flaw in all of it is obviously us in trying to remember. And that's why the Lord's Supper is so important to us.
Yeah, and it does work. It
For
just
us, yeah.
it worked for them as well. Here's the thing. Like them, we forget. We stray. We lose faith, lose heart. Sister Butchie, did you have a comment?
Well, I was gonna say, it's obvious, even in our society, you see people around the holiday, Christmas, they're much more, I don't know, amiable. and present as Christian for that short time, and that's it. Then they go right back into, it's all worldly. You know, it's like they put it on just for the season, and then they move on. So this is extremely important, why he said it the way he did. He knows us.
Yes.
He knows us.
And so it's absolute, like you said, people are, very amiable during certain times of year, to a degree. If you're reaching for the same Cabbage Patch doll, then they lose all of that. But otherwise, they tend to be a little bit more. But again, we need this memorial. Even Israel, when they would go through the cycle, we're going to see this later, as they go through the cycle of Judges, they forget, and how are they reminded? Oh yeah, there's a song that told us exactly what we're going to do. It does work. Even in our lapses, God knows what he's done. The question is, will we reflect? It's always a question. The issue is not if God's given us the tools, it's just us. Brother Young.
Did you time this lesson because next Sunday is Easter?
No. After that Sunday will be the Lord's Day, and then the following one will be the Lord's Day as well, and we'll get to some other things. So, but no, we're definitely leading into that time of year where people are focused again on Christ, and we want to utilize that to the best of our abilities. But no, I can't take credit for timing out, running behind in the class. So we saw the firstborn in Egypt die. Pharaoh urges Israel to leave. I did want to say again with the Passover, emphasize though that pattern that started then when we partake of the Lord's Supper, that is hearkening back to that same idea, that Passover lamb that was sacrificed. We don't slay a lamb year by year. We have something more perfect. Christ is our sacrifice. But even in Isaiah, he said, when you will make his soul an offering for sin, it's still on us to make him our offering. And that is a significance that we do need to be reminded of week by week. That is why we partake of it. Israel departs from Egypt, and the multitude go with them. I'd love to go deeper into that. The Passover regulations are further explained, so we get further information in dealing with the Passover, and the sanctification of the firstborn and the Feast of Unleavened Bread are implemented. So that's going to bring us to next week. We're going to close here. Next week, we are at the actual Exodus, for which this book is named. The Exodus is them actually departing. Everything from now is what led up to that. Now they will actually be departing. I know I have some extra time, but if I go over, I'm going to go very over. So we're going to stop right here and pick it up next week at the Exodus. Thank you for your attention and participation.